Hey, Scott.
Hey Steve, how are you?
You know what's really funny is this morning I was thinking Scotty Fuse, and I was like, where did that come from? Then I remembered fast acting fuses. So I ended up listening to like acting fuses this morning. I heard that thing you did at the Linwood. Then I heard the two records you did, Sayonara. I remember that record because it's like,
Yeah,
what, 20 years old or something?
yeah, I think it was 2001 or 2, somewhere around there.
Yeah, and I was like, but you have a long list of bands, which I'm going to go through all of them with you. But before that, before we talk
All
about
right.
Cortez, because I ran into you at the Middle East, and that's how we finally got to do this. Because
Right.
I've had you on my radar for a long time. So,
Yeah, yeah, we had talked at one point and then I think the scheduling didn't work out, so I
yeah,
guess it was fortuitous that we ran into each other the other night.
you're not the only one, man, you know. And we've known
Yeah.
each other for a while. When I met you, you just started growing your beard. That's a joke.
It's a
For
good
you
one.
people listening, you'll have to go on YouTube to see what I'm talking about if you don't know Scotty Fuse. He's got a major league beard, like major league. So, did you grow up in the Boston area? Because I don't know if you did or not.
I did. I actually grew up on the South Shore in a town called Whitman, Massachusetts. It's next to Brockton and Weymouth, Abington, down that way. It's about 40 minutes south of the city.
That's funny.
Suburban wasteland.
There's a band in Boston, Yucky Gipe's son's band, Max. They call it "Blame It on Whitman," and I talked to him about that. He said it's about the town of Whitman. I don't know the details, but
Oh, that's funny.
what was it like growing up there? That's kind of a little ways out of the city, right?
Yeah, it was I mean the town itself was like I think it's like 7 square miles or something. There's like 14, 15,000 people, really suburban, really boring. Um, from the time I can remember, me and all my friends were just into like skateboarding and BMX bikes and all that sort of stuff. And building tree forts, running around in the woods, acting like idiots, all the kind of things you do when you're young, when you're bored.
When did you start getting into music? Were you really young?
Yeah, I mean, I almost can't remember specifically because my father and my grandfather were both really big into music.
Really?
Yeah, my grandfather had a mass. You can see my records or some of my records back here. My grandfather
Yeah.
had a
Yeah, I
big
see
band
him.
swing, a big band swing collection that was probably at least that size, if not bigger. And I always remember hearing that around his house, when I was a kid. And then my dad always liked, rock and roll. Credence, Zeppelin, AC/DC, Stones, stuff like that, Beach Boys, Beatles. And actually, the Beach Boys and the Beatles are probably like the two things I really remember hearing as like a young kid and really liking. So that's kind of where it started.
Were records that he was playing around the house?
Records and 8-track tapes as
Eight
well.
tracks.
I remember, like being in the middle of a song and you'd be all into it, and then it would like click to switch track, and you'd be like, oh, and you'd miss like a couple seconds of the song. It was such a drag.
If you had Yes CDs, Yes was the famous band for that. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
Relayer, I think, was on three different tracks, I
Well, right.
mean,
Their songs are like 20 minutes long, some of them,
right,
right? So yeah.
right. So, so did you catch on to the Beatles and the Beach Boys when they were playing around the house a lot?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I really remember having I think my dad had given me some of his hand me down vinyl, and I remember having a copy of the White Album and a copy of Magical Mystery Tour, uh, which was the one that I was fascinated by because they had the movie or the TV show
Yeah,
about
the
that, and
film.
yeah, so the album was like a gatefold, and it had like a book with all the pictures of the characters and all the kooky stuff from the film. And as like a 5 or 6 year old kid, I was like just fascinated by that, in addition to the music as well. But
Funny,
the visual component was.
yeah, one of my favorite Beatles songs is on that "Hey Bulldog," it's on the Magical Mystery Tour. It was in the record. It's
I
kind of
don't
a
remember that one. I haven't listened to that in so long, and I don't remember that song off the
It's
top of my
not a
head. But
famous song. It's not a
yeah,
famous
yeah,
Beatles song, And that record was where they really started getting experimental. So,
yes.
what did you think when you got into the Beatles? I mean, did they like? what kind of response did you get from them?
I loved it. I mean, I straight away, like I really liked it. And I think maybe being so young and not really having a frame of reference other than, maybe hearing like whatever AM Gold was on the radio in the early 70s or like the Supremes and stuff like that. Um, that was really my first real exposure to music was like the Beatles and the Beach Boys. And I remember just being fascinated by like Hello Goodbye. Is that the song? You say
Yeah,
goodbye, I say hello, whatever. That one, I loved that one for some reason. Um, Penny Lane was one I really liked a lot. I think I had Sergeant Pepper's as well, now that I think about it too. Um, yeah, it just, and the Beach Boys were always there too. I really, really loved their like harmony vocals. And I remember loving like God Only Knows and Wouldn't It Be Nice and some of those songs
it's
from
funny
their like
hearing
Pet
you.
Sounds.
It's funny hearing you talk like this because my first experience of you is Bastard Squad, and it
Yeah,
wasn't
right. Yeah, yeah.
exactly influenced by the Beatles, I don't think. But
Not at all. Yeah.
when did you start? I mean, you mentioned like you like that music. When did you start discovering your own stuff and like that's what I like,
I
and
think from that, I probably started like listening to the radio and I remember I have vivid, few vivid memories of being like young and hearing things on the radio. And I used to stay up like past my bedtime with like the little transistor radio like under my pillow, to listen to the Dr. Demento show.
oh
Do you
yeah,
remember
yeah,
that?
yeah.
Yeah. Listen to all those like Spike Jones songs and just ridiculous, novelty songs. And I got a kick out of that. Um, but it was on at the time, I think it was on WCOZ, if you remember that
Yeah,
record,
I
the
do.
radio station, kick ass rock and roll. um, but I remember hearing like Highway to Hell. So this was like 1979, like before that, and I didn't hear who it was or what it was. So I was like 9 years old because I was born in 1970. And I remember just being absolutely dumbfounded. It was like nothing I had ever heard before in my life. And I was on a quest to just like find out like who that was. And it took me a while, but I finally was able to find out who it was. And I think I convinced my mother to like take me to Bradley's to buy a cassette, and I got that. And I think one song maybe before that that I had heard was I remember hearing like Hot Blooded by Foreigner on the
Foreigner.
radio on like like a Saturday morning or something like early in the morning, just listening to my father's stereo, and that came on whatever radio station was on. And I remember, I think because it's got that kind of guitar riff, din, 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 I remember really being drawn to the guitar like at a very early age. So anything that had like a prominent guitar, I think sort of drew me in like right away. And that's another one that I really remember.
When did you get your first guitar? I mean, was it something that happened right away and you asked your mom, can I get a guitar? Or
Not right away. I think first I just kind of got into the music, just trying to buy cassettes whenever I had money. Um, but I do remember my father, I think, wanted to take guitar lessons, and I was probably like 10 or 11 at this point. So not long after the Dr. Demento episode. Um, and he bought like a cheap acoustic guitar somewhere, and there was an older guy who was probably like not that old, but to me at the time he seemed old,
yeah.
who had like a little music store in like the basement of the house that he lived at, and he gave guitar lessons. So my dad and I would both go with this acoustic guitar, and then one of us would go first, and then the other, for like a half hour each, and we would learn like Beatles melodies like on the vocal melodies like on the guitar, how to pick them and that sort of thing. And then my father lost interest. I sort of lost interest because I didn't think that was exciting, even though I liked the Beatles. Like being able to play like just ding ding little like one note things wasn't exciting to me. So I just sort of never really did anything with it. And then I don't know, probably when I was around 13 or 14, I really got the urge to want to be in a band and like play music. And that was when I had discovered more like heavy metal and stuff like that. And I was just like, I need an electric guitar. And I didn't even know like what that meant. I just knew it was loud. right? But I didn't know that you needed an amplifier or that you needed a tuner or
Right.
that you
Yeah.
needed like cables or any of this stuff. So I think I convinced my mother to take me to Brockton, which was the city next door to Whitman, and bought like a $100 like cheapo like Stratocaster copy that looked like the one the Edge played in U2 in the early '80s, which is why I liked it. So I convinced her to get that, and then I think shortly thereafter I got like a small little PV combo amp or something, and that's pretty much been it. I've been playing ever since. So
Were
it's
there
probably like
guys, I'm sorry, were there guys in your neighborhood that were playing that you around you? And how did you?
no, that's the funny thing. I didn't know anybody else, or at least not that I can remember. I don't remember anyone else in my neighborhood. Like, I mean, there were people that were in band that played like, trumpet or whatever, and I had actually tried trombone for like 6 months, when I was in like, elementary school, and I hated that. But yeah, so it was just kind of me. I didn't know anybody else. And it wasn't really until I got into high school that I met some other people and started like trying to put a band together, unsuccessfully for the most part. But
I have a long list of band. I'm not going to be able to talk about. I've got a few I want to talk about, but
sure.
I'm going to just spit these names out right now. And if you want to talk about, Sucker Punch, Crawl, Against the World, Seconds, Bastard Squad, which we can talk about, Road Crew, Jake. You were in all
Okay.
those bands?
No, some of those were song titles.
Oh,
So
what?
Sucker Punch was my first like real band. We were like a hardcore band.
How did I get
Um,
song titles mixed up with bands? Sorry
I
about
don't know,
that.
but it's all right. Um, but Sucker Punch was, I think, probably I got into a band with these guys from Hingham. Um, in like 1987 or so, and they had a band, and I joined as a guitar player, and it kind of fizzled out right away. But then the other guitar player from that band wanted to sing in a hardcore band, so that's when we started Sucker Punch, and we were around I think from like '87 or '88 to like 1990. Probably played like 10 shows, and have a song on like a Boston hardcore comp that came out in like the early '90s, but it was supposed to come out in like the late '80s at some point, and it took a while.
Was it one of the songs that was a song that I thought was a band?
Yeah,
Crawl or oh
Against the
man,
World was the song on that. Yeah, yeah.
I don't know how I did that. Sorry, man.
That's all right. We only recorded one demo with 5 songs, and that's one of the five.
There's
So
so much for preparation. I do know that Bastard Squad was a band because around the
yes.
time that I met you, which was, and I moved back to Boston, and it must have been around, when I met you? I think I met you through Three and a Half Girls, didn't I?
Okay, yeah, yeah, yeah. That
Yeah,
sounds about
because
right. Yep.
the Linwood,
Yep,
hanging out
and
at the
probably at a
Lin.
show at O'Brien's or the Linwood or something. Yeah.
And I knew that you were in Bastard Squad then. And then before long, you guys started Static.
Right. Yep. That actually sort of started almost like immediately. Bastard Squad was actually Crawl was also a band. It was the band I did after. I took a few years off after Sucker Punch, and then I did that band. We played around the city a bunch, and we had a falling out with one of the guitar players, and he left, and we went from being more of like a grungy sort of rock thing to more of a punk band because we all decided we wanted to go back more to like punk stuff that we grew up listening to. So we went and did that, and we were together I think for like 2 years, and then our singer Jerry and our bass player Andre both ended up moving out to the West Coast, and that's sort of when the band just kind of fizzled out. But Dave, the other guitar player, had started Static,
Dave.
sort of like, yeah, sort of right at the end because he was a songwriter and liked, he wasn't like the biggest punk rock guy. He was more into like new wave and like synth stuff, and like, I mean, he liked punk as well, but he wasn't like, that wasn't his main focus. So he had all these songs that he wanted to write that weren't really fitting in with that. Um, but it ended up not really sounding anything like his influences. It just ended up sounding more like sort of like melodic alt rock sort of stuff.
Poppy punk almost.
Yeah, there was like a bit of a punk influence maybe in some of the loud guitar aspect of it or whatever, but definitely a lot more melodic. I think it was maybe like Weezer territory, something like that. I guess would be like us early Foo Fighters, maybe.
Yeah, I mean,
Something.
I helped, I worked with you Static for a little
Right.
while, and we did, a bunch of show. I saw the band many. I was a huge fan of the band, really good band.
That was a lot
And
of fun.
one thing I wanted to bring up is because people tell me all the time that they were at the Nashville Pussy show, the first one at the Linwood.
Yeah,
I know for a fact that you were there.
yeah, yeah,
I was there, and there were like 60, 70 people there. But if you ask around town now, 600 people will tell you they were there. What do
yeah.
you
Well, it's a
remember
stuff
about
of
that?
legend, right?
It was Static, Zeke, and Nashville Pussy. What do you remember about that show? That was amazing.
Yeah, I remember that we were like, "Whoa, we don't fit on this bill at all," because we were so like poppy, and Zeke is so loud and fast and really down and dirty, and then Nashville Pussy is, I mean, and that was, in the full on like fire breathing, like the whole show aspect of it time. Um, I just remember thinking both those bands were like amazing, and we were just happy to play the show, even though I
You
felt like
guys
we
did
were we
good.
were a little odd. Yeah, I think the Linwood was sort of our home base actually, because
Yeah.
Dave and I shared an apartment like literally right behind the Linwood, so we were there every night. So we knew like everyone in that neighborhood. So that was sort of our. It's probably one of the places we played the most in that band, and we used to do really well there. So it was fun. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, you guys knew the booking agent pretty good at that time. So he helped you get a
Yep,
few shows, right?
absolutely. Yeah,
Talking about me.
I know. I know.
No, I mean that was a fun time for me too. That's how I got to know, I got to know you a little before that for 3.5, because I think you and Susan met and you were around a lot.
Yep.
Um, yeah, that show was pretty spectacular. I mean, it was I remember the place almost burnt down. So that's what I do
Yeah.
remember. When I
Yeah.
saw the flame go across the ceiling, I was like, oh no, what are we gonna do,
I do have to admit that that was probably more toward the end of the night, and I would assume that just based on my behavior back then, I was probably not in as good of a state to remember everything so well. Let's just put it that way.
We were all in that state at that time.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and then you guys became favorite Atomic Hero. Were you in the band the whole time? Because I lost track of you guys
Not the
after.
whole time. We changed the name because there was another band called at the time called like Static X, and everyone
Yeah.
used to keep asking us Static X, and it was just really confusing. I mean, we sounded nothing like them, but just the name, I think everybody would get it confused. So we just thought like, oh, we need to get a new name, and I don't think we had taken that from the title of a Jawbox song, and I don't think we were ever like totally in love with it. It was just sort of we need a name. Oh, this is kind of cool. It doesn't really nobody was super attached to it, I don't think, so but like
The
favorite Atomic Hero came about like uh X the bass player had this idea to like just come up with cool words and like put them all into like a hat and just draw 3 words. So he kept doing that all night and just kept coming up with the most ridiculous things, and then finally favorite Atomic Hero popped up and everyone was like, oh, that's kind of cool. It doesn't really signify anything, but it has sort of like, I don't know, mid-century sci-fi kind of vibe to it or something. So we all thought it was cool, so we went with it.
you guys had a legitimate hit song too, California. That song still holds the test of time now. It's a good
I
one.
will take no credit for that. I wrote a guitar solo and like maybe one little like thing, but that was Dave totally.
Yeah.
Most of the songwriting in that was his, although there were songs. I mean, we did collaborate, like, but he would in that band he would more bring almost a finished product, and then we would sort of add little bits and pieces to it and sort of arrange things like as a group. But that was more like his vehicle.
Forgive my timeline here. I already
Excuse me.
screwed up some song titles with band names.
No sweat.
Fast Acting Fuses came really close to the end of that, right? Or did you start it before it ended?
Nope, I was in favorite Atomic Hero, and then I had also started playing with Razor Wire, who were like a punk band in the city that had been around forever,
Yeah.
and they needed a guitar player, and they were friends of mine, so I sort of jumped in just on a like, hey, I'll give you guys a hand, whatever. And then I ended up being in the band for like 4 or 5 years. But that band sort of fizzled out. The singer had moved away. And then we got my friend Kevin, who was the singer in Sucker Punch originally, but also was the first singer in Fast Acting Fuses. We called him up and he did a few shows with us, but then we started writing all new songs, and it started to change the way the music was. And then the bass player ended up, I think he ended up moving away, or he wasn't able to commit
Darga?
enough time. Not Darga. That was in Fast Acting Fuses, the bass player in Razor Wire.
Oh,
Dave
okay.
Pratt. His name was Dave Pratt. He's lives in Texas now. But he ended up moving away. And then I think at that point, the rest of us were like, well, this is going really good. Why don't we try to get a new band? I mean, a new bass player, and just continue the band along the direction we're going. So Andre, who had been playing guitar, was sort of doubling on bass. And then we went in to record a demo at a studio in Providence. It was a friend of Kevin, our singers. And Darga had been friends with JJ, was the guy that owned the studio, with him as well. And then we ended up hanging out at the studio one night. I think Darga liked the demo, and then we were like, hey, you want to jump in? So he ended up playing with us. So, and he played with us for a few years. And then we had a bunch of, the singer left, Darga left, and we had some like lineup changes, and it kind of plagued us for the rest of our time together.
I
But then
knew about
Unger sang, Unger from White Dynamite sang for us after that.
that was on the Volume is Job One
Mm-hmm.
EPs. Yeah. You know, I
Yep.
remember the Sayonara. I didn't remember Unger because I was really in a during that period I was got really busy with management stuff and
Oh
I
yeah, sure.
wasn't all, but I remember you guys. What I found interesting is that you guys recorded your first show at the Linwood and it's on Bandcamp. Was that
Yeah.
Alan Kraut that recorded it?
I don't remember if it was Alan, or it might have actually been Pat Leonard from the Moving
Oh,
Targets. Pat was he recorded the album, and he was doing live sound for us for a while, and I think Pat may have recorded it, but at this point I'm not 100% sure if that was the
sounds
case.
good, man.
Yeah, it does sound pretty good. It was very raw, but that's kind of what we were at that point. We were sort of going for like a Poison idea, like meets rock and roll kind of vibe.
But you guys had a pretty good buzz going and you were around for like what, 5 years or something like that?
Yeah, yeah, about 5 years.
Um, I got Black Tie on my list here. You played with them too, right?
Yep, that was after um, after Fast Acting Fuses. I started doing Cortez like within like 3 or 4 months, and then after our original singer in Cortez left, he was in the band for like 2 years, and he did the first EP with us, but it didn't really work out. Excuse me. So we were looking to get a new singer, and things sort of slowed down. And Jim Healy from Blood Lightning now,
Yeah.
but We're All Gonna Die at the time, I think they had maybe just broken up as well. And he and I were friends and used to go out drinking together a lot and work together a bit. And we had always just been like, oh, we should do something. It might be fun. And so we started doing that, and I think we did that for about 4 years, maybe 5 years. I think four. Yeah.
It was a real tight music community at that time, because I know you worked at Mark Schleicher too, and all those
Yep.
guys were always kind of like, the New Alliance, scene down there and the Linwood, and that's when Boston proper was like had a proper music scene. Now it's like
Yeah.
Cambridge and Somerville, and but so it doesn't surprise me that you guys were hanging out back then. And you guys just played a show together, which I just saw, which
Yeah. Yeah. It
so
was
Court
funny because sorry, just a real quick aside on that. At that Ripple Fest show, I was talking, I think, with Craig Riggs and maybe Jim, but I was saying like, I think every band there, except for the band that was from Connecticut, we'd all been in bands with each other at some point or another. Like different, members had played with each other. See, it was pretty incestuous in that regard. But that's what happens, I guess, when you're in your 50s and you've been playing music since you were like a teenager.
didn't Riggs drum for Fact Acting
Yep.
Fuses as well? Yeah, I thought
He's
so.
on that volume is Job One EP that's on Bandcamp with Unger, yeah. And then JR from Blood Lightning replaced replaced Riggs. Yeah.
Was
So
Darger, Riggs, and Dave Unger all in the band at the same time?
no. Unger joined the band after Darga had already left, but Unger and Riggs were in the band at the same time. Yeah.
I was gonna say White Lightning, you know, 20.
Yeah. Yeah. White Dynamite. Yeah.
I mean, White Dynamite,
Yeah.
Blood Lightning, White Dynamite. Sorry,
I know
there's a lot
it's
of names here.
confusing. Yeah.
Um, okay, so you guys, you know, I think your first record with Cortez was Thunder in a Forgotten Town, and Schleicher. I mentioned Schleicher.
Yeah.
Did did you do that at the 1312 Boylston Street, New Alliance? Is that where you recorded that?
I think we were maybe one of the first bands in the EMF building, if I remember
Cambridge.
correctly, because it was 2006. And I think at that point the Beacon Street building was already gone. Or sorry, Boylston Street building was already gone. Um, so I think if I remember correctly, it was at the new EMF one,
Yeah,
and
I
it
got a
was
little
very early on.
because I think they opened up in 2006 or right around that time. So you must have
Yeah,
been
I
one of
know
the early.
we were in there like pretty early.
Tell me about Cortez and how it all came together.
Yeah, it I like I said, Fast Act and Fuses had broken up, and I think it was the first time since I was like 18 that I wasn't in a band, and I was sort of like didn't know what to do with myself, you know. So there was like 3 months of just not playing, and um, I was trying to find something, but everybody was in a band at the time, and there was not really a lot of opportunities for me that I found. Um, and then Tim Katz actually he must have called me because it was probably early in the texting days. I don't know how easy it was to text back then, but I think Tim called me when I was walking home from my girlfriend at the time, but my wife now, her apartment back to my apartment in Alston, and he said that this band that I had heard of called Sin City Chainsaw, their guitar player had just left, and that they were looking to maybe get a new guitar player or start something new. And I didn't know any of the guys very well. I knew Jeremy, the drummer, very randomly just from seeing him around here and there. But I didn't know him well. But I remember thinking that they were a solid band, and I was like, oh, that might be worth checking out. So he was like, can I give them your number and have them give you a call? And I was like, yeah, sure. So Jeremy called me, and I think within a week we went down to they had some rehearsal space in Watertown, and we went down there. I met them, and they showed me like two or three of their songs, and we worked on those for a little bit. And then I was like, oh, I have these two riffs, which were both ideas that had been sort of at the end of the Fast Acting Fuses that never really
Yeah.
got recorded or turned into a full proper song. And I took a couple of the riffs from those, and we started playing, and we wrote two songs off that EP. Like I think that night with those riffs, and the song "The High Life" and the song called "The Ocean." And we
Did,
still occasionally play "The High Life." Actually,
did you have come up with a name at that point, or did you have the
no,
name?
at that point we didn't have a name. I think after I don't know a few weeks or a month of rehearsing, and then thinking like, oh, maybe we should try to play a show, because I think we got together in March, and I think we played our first show in like July 1st at O'Brien's. So it was a pretty quick thing. Um, but yeah, I think I was listening to a lot of Neil Young at that time and Cortez the Killer. So,
I was
and
hoping you were going to say that.
I think I said, what about Cortez the Killer? And everyone was like, it's too long. And then I was like, what about just Cortez? Like it, and then we thought about it, and we're like, it doesn't really denote like any specific type of music, or like, because we didn't want to have a band that was like, okay, they're a metal band, or oh, they're this or that. We just wanted a simple name that didn't really have any associations, and we were like, yeah, Cortez is cool. Let's do it. So we just kind of ran with it.
I love Cortez the Killer, by the way.
Same.
It would be probably one of my top. As a guitar player, you gotta love that song. It's like
Yeah,
just
we actually played it once. We learned
really.
it and played it. Yeah, way on in the early days. We actually played a show at the Model Cafe, which was just stupid. The police came because it was too loud. Because we were in there with like full stacks, just like as loud as humanly possible. Those were in the early days when we were all about like everything has to be on 10. It's going to be bludgeoning. We don't quite do that as much anymore, but
I
that was
kind of
sort of our vibe at the time.
I kind of jumped ahead of myself a little bit, bringing up the first album. I mean, you did it with Schleicher.
Yeah.
2007 was probably still Quintain. He probably Quintain or um. Oh my God, I'm drawing a mental
He may have
block.
been playing an Antler at that point
Oh, really?
with
Antler.
Riggs and Cats, but I could be wrong too. I get confused on some of the timelines sometimes.
So
But yeah,
you guys were friends for a
mhm,
while, probably, and
yeah,
how did you, was it just something like, he's the guy we should do it. He's a was a really good engineer, by the way. I love.
yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, we all liked Mark, and I think he and Jeremy were working doing construction together at the time, if I'm not mistaken. So it was just sort of like I don't even think there was like a question. It was just like, oh yeah, let's go do it at New Alliance with Mark, you know. And at the time, like New Alliance was one of the great studio, still is. I didn't mean that in the past tense, but at the time it was like the place you went. So it was like, yeah, New Alliance, great, let's do it. And
What
Mark was our friend. So
what was it like when you guys, for around that time you had your record come out? Did you have a good buzz around town?
we did actually. We sort of got a really good buzz like right away. Our EP, we signed with a small Belgian label that wanted to put it out like right away. We went over to Belgium, within the first year of
You
being
did.
together and played like 2 or 3 shows. They put on like a festival for their record label. Um, yeah, and we got a bunch of slots like right away, like opening, and then it just seemed like from then on it didn't stop. And then we decided that we were going to part ways with our singer, and so that at that point like things kind of slowed down a bit, and it took us a while to find a singer, and there was a bunch of like not really being sure like what was we kept playing together, but we weren't really sure what was going to happen. And Craig Riggs came and filled in for us for a while, and we played the Rumble with like Riggs singing for us, which was awesome. um I think that was at the old Harper's Ferry before it became Brighton Music Hall. That was a lot of fun.
Was it still
um
BCN at the time?
it may have been BCN, it may have been ZLX. I think Mark Hamilton may have been running it at that point.
BCN still, yeah.
Yeah, I think, but again, I could be wrong.
I think it was BCN. 2000 was 2007 or 8 around that time.
Yeah, I think it was 2000, early 2008, maybe April 2008, I think.
I know that you did a self-titled record with Ethan. Was there something in between the EP and
N-
the self-titled? Did you take a break or
no,
something?
no, that was when what I was just talking about happened. We left our first singer left. Riggs sang with us for a little while to help us out. And then um, we were sort of like, oh, and we found a new singer, but it took us a while to get everything together and to write and then to get back into record. I think at the time too, we didn't have a lot of funds, to go in and record. So it took us some time to A, work up a catalog, and then B, to come up with some money to get into the studio and record. So I think the funny thing is that we recorded that I think in 2010 maybe, or 2009, end of
And
2009, beginning of
it took a
2010, but it
little
didn't
while to
come
be
out
released.
for a couple
Yeah.
of years. Yeah, we had to find a label to put it out, because the label that we were on prior had folded by that point, so they weren't together, weren't around anymore. So
And then I know a few years later, you did a record with Benny Grotto, and
yes, yeah,
which is a great record, Depths Below, right? Yeah, it's a
yes,
good one. So you still kind of got that Alston rock thing going on, and now Benny, that must have been at Mad Oak, right? Was that when Mad Oak first opened?
it was at actually Depths Below. I think was a little all over. We had done some Fuses stuff at Mad Oak, but not with Benny. I think Ethan had done some with us, and Riggs had maybe done some with us. And then when we were in Cortez, we went back to Mad Oak to do a single, and Benny recorded that, and we really enjoyed working with Benny. And I think at the time Ethan was maybe not recording, or he was living out of state or something.
He went to
Because I know
Texas, yeah.
yeah, there was a while where he wasn't doing anything in the recording around here. So we started working with Benny, and we all knew Benny, but like we sort of just developed a relationship with Benny, and we really liked, the product that we got at the end from him. So we just sort of have stayed with him. And at this point, it's like we know what we're going to do. He knows what we want to do. And we don't even have to really talk about it. We just get in there and get down to business. And it's really good. But I think Depths Below was when Mad Oak was starting to transition from their old space on Rug Road to the new one that they have new, the one by O'Brien's. And I think we did some recording at like Q Division and some at Moon Tower. And then we maybe did some guitar overdubs at the new Mad Oak space or something, if I remember correctly. So that one was done a little all over. But then the Sell the Future, which was the following one, was done at that Mad Oak. And then the new one that's going to be coming out in October was also done at Mad Oak as well.
With Benny.
Yep.
Well,
so we've done 3 albums with Benny and 1 single at this, and 4 songs for like a split. So we've recorded with Benny probably like 6 times now, or 5 times.
I've noticed a lot of people when they start working with Benny stick with Benny. He's really good, man. Really good.
Yeah, it's just one of those things. I mean, the studio's comfortable. Riggs is an old friend of everybody, and Benny's our friend, and Benny's great, and it just works for us. So we haven't found a need to change.
Before you put Sell the Future out, you had an EP as well, Second Coming of Heavy, Chapter 9. With these,
Yep.
Had you gotten involved with Ripple at this point, or is that still?
Yeah, we had Ripple actually wanted to put out the Depths Below originally, because they had our self-titled EP that Ethan had recorded, and Todd, the owner, really liked it and would always like post songs from it and be like, "Oh, I'm jamming the new Cortez today," on like his social media. So we just started to talk. And then I think when Depths Below was coming out, it was the same thing. The record label that we had put out the self-titled on went out of business, and we were looking for a new label. Small labels, it's hard.
Yeah, I know.
And I hit up Todd, and he was like, "Oh, I'd love to put it out, but I got to tell you right now, it's going to be at least 2 years before I can put it out." And we were just like, we can't wait 2 years. We had already been waiting a long time at that point with recording and all this other stuff. And it just was like, that would have been like a 7-year gap between like albums. And we were like, we can't do that. We're already bad at doing like 4 and 5 year gaps between albums, So that was always in the back of our mind, but we ended up going with a friend of ours had a label that he was starting up called Salt of the Earth Records, and he wanted to put it out. So we went with him and he put it out. But then in the interim, we had been still talking with Todd, and Todd was wanted to put out a split. And that was like the perfect opportunity for it, because they had a series, obviously, because that was like Chapter 9. So they had a series where one band would do one side and another band would do the other side, and they would pair you up with a different band. So that was like sort of our entry like onto the label.
But it seems almost like Ripple is a Boston label, but they're not.
There's a lot of Boston. Yeah, they're in
Yeah.
California. Yeah, there's a lot of Boston bands on or have been on that label at one point.
Getting a little up to date here now. You've gone through quite a bit of lineup changes. I mean, how many original members are actually still in the band?
Jay, the bass player, and myself.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Out of the 5, it started as 4 and then 5. But we're the original 2.
And the singer is he's like the second singer, and was there another singer too, or just 2?
Well, there was Craig Riggs filled in for a while,
right,
in between Matt, our current singer, and Curtis, our former singer. Yeah,
I saw you guys at the Middle East at the Ripple show, and I was blown away. I wanted to ask you, your guitar playing, do you feel like there was a part of along this journey that we just took, which started like way back in the 80s to now?
Yeah.
When did you really feel like your guitar playing went to another level?
Never. No. Realistically, I would say I really started to feel more confident I always felt confident in my rhythm playing from day one, but I think getting into heavy metal as a young kid, but abandoning it really before I got good at playing leads, and then getting into hardcore and punk rock where I deemed like playing lead not essential.
Right.
I didn't really play lead a lot until Bastard Squad. We started incorporating, like sort of like Chuck Berry style lead breaks into songs to make it a little less boring and bring in like maybe a little Johnny Thunders kind of element or something. You know what I mean? So that was where I maybe in earnest really started trying to play lead more. And I think from that over the years, it's just gotten as like with anything, right? The more you do it, the better you get at it. But I think around 2009 when I was playing in Cortez and Black Tie, and both bands were playing out a bit, recording a lot, practicing a lot. Black Tie was touring a bit, around the East Coast. So I felt like that was when I really felt like, okay, like I'm noticing a huge difference in my playing now. And I think from that point on, I felt a lot more confident. And now I feel like when we're writing or recording an album, instead of just going in and like trying to do something off the top of my head, like I take time at home with my computer and listen to the song and try to actually write a solo as opposed to just play a solo, and try to refine it, and sometimes try to do things that maybe I'm not really that good at and force myself to get better at it. And then I think that has also made me better
I
at
was really
playing lead as
impressed.
well.
I was
Thank you.
really impressed with your playing, man. You got a nice setup
You
too.
got to
It
pay
sounds
attention to Alistair, the other guitar player. He makes me look like an amateur. So
well, I don't know about that. I mean, the whole band was really good. Bass player's really good too.
oh
Were
yeah,
there any guitar players, by the way, that you admire that kind of helped influence your playing at all?
absolutely. I mean, I think the first one or first two are probably Angus and Malcolm. Because like I said, AC/DC was the first one that really caught my attention for like guitar music. And then, I got into metal in the early 80s. So like, I don't know, whoever was like a shred guy at the time, I probably thought the guy from Dawkins was a good player.
George
Like,
Lynch.
yeah, I mean, thought the guy in Rat was good, but then I got more into like Metallica, Slayer, stuff like that. And that like, so like, I really liked like Kirk Hammett at the time. Now when I listen to him, he's not my favorite, but at the time I really liked what he was doing. But then I've always loved Mick Taylor from the Rolling Stones.
Yeah.
Rick and Frank Agnew from the Adolescents. I think
Oh yeah.
that California, but they do all that, and I actually ripped them off hard in our song No Escape. That's the first song on Sell the Future.
I
They
like
do
that
this thing
song.
a lot where there's a lot of like sliding octaves, on like the A string and the G string, and they just slide them up and down the neck melodically. And I've always done that ever since I figured out how to do that. And whenever I find a song where I can sneak that in, I always do. So that's a huge one. Um, Damn, I'm drawing a blank.
Well,
There's a million
you're
other
talking
guitar
about
players,
punk
but
and hard rock and metal, so
oh
you're
yeah,
borrowing your influences from a lot of different genres.
yeah. I mean, and that's the thing, right? I mean, you can again, all the records, like they're not all one style of music. So I have a pretty broad
I'm
taste in
very
music.
jealous, by the way. I have a lot of records, but that's quite a wall you have behind you of
I,
vinyl.
I I worked in a record store when I was like 18, and that's where it started. So
Really, what record store?
Music Smith in Hanover,
Yeah, there
Massachusetts at the
was like a
Hanover
little
Mall.
chain, right? Yeah,
Yeah, there was. Yeah,
I
yeah.
remember
And
them.
do you know Eric Law?
I love Eric Law, of course.
Eric was my assistant manager at Music Smith,
Really?
so I've known him since the 80s. Yeah.
There's not very many people I know that are more knowledgeable about music than Eric Law. He's got
Yeah, oh
like
yeah. He's a
amazing
sensei.
knowledge.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I credit him to this day with lots of things that I would have not known anything about, like hot chocolate. You know what I mean? Like I never would have known that band if it wasn't for Eric, you know?
Hot chocolate. I wasn't
I mean,
expecting that, but
yeah,
that's good.
Heaven's in the backseat of my Cadillac. I mean, how can you go wrong with that, you know?
So you got a new album coming. Cortez has a new album coming in October on
Yes,
Ripple. You must be pretty excited. I'm sure it's gonna be on vinyl as well, right?
it is. Yeah, it's going to be vinyl and CD and download. So, yeah, digital media.
Nice. Um,
It's called Thieves and Charlatans. I guess I should give you the name.
yeah, definitely. And I can't wait to hear it. Now you have a new drummer too, right?
We do. Kyle Rasmussen, who has played in Phantom Glue, and he was the original drummer in Black Tie with Jim Healy and myself.
Get some
Yep,
history with you.
absolutely. So we just had our first rehearsal. Well, Kyle filled in over the autumn for a couple of show dates out of town in like Philadelphia that we couldn't. Our original drummer couldn't do. Not our, excuse me, our Alexi, our last drummer, couldn't do. Um, so Kyle is kind of getting back up to speed on the songs that we played in the set, but now he's got a whole ton of new stuff he needs to learn. So we're going to be woodshedding for a while
Yeah,
over
your
the summer.
music's not easy. It's not, it's complicated, you know. I mean, I know you guys are on a stoner rock show, but you seem a lot more than you know how bands get thrown into certain categories and you think, well, they're not just that, you know. That's what I
Yeah,
think about Cortez, you know.
yeah. I mean, I think that's definitely apt. I mean, when we started, we were very like Caius, Black Sabbath, CO mid period COC kind of band. But I think over time we've sort of tried not to just do one thing. We all like tons of different types of music, like from Motown to reggae to jazz. And not that we're going to incorporate all of that into the music, but I feel like to just limit yourself to one specific genre or micro genre within that genre is not good, And I don't know. Yeah, I feel like we've always just been like play what we want to play. And then one thing about the stoner rock thing, just real quick, that has influenced us is that sometimes we play these shows with a lot of other stoner rock bands, and you notice that every song is like plodding and mid tempo or very slow. And we were always like, man, I don't know how many more like hours of just slow songs I can listen to. I love that. But after a while, it gets to be like, so we purposely started to write like faster songs to be like, okay, we're going to stand out when we play at this like show with all these bands that are playing slower. If we come out and have like two or three like fast songs, you know what I mean? So,
I've been listening to a lot of Electric Wizard lately. I don't
oh
know
yeah,
why. I
yeah,
really like them, man. And
yeah.
Caius and Fu Manchu. Their cover of Godzilla. I have to listen to that like almost
Oh,
every week. I
it's
love
great.
that. Before I let you go, Scott, I just want to ask you, there are a lot of, do you go to a lot of shows and are you listening to a lot of music these days?
I'm always listening to a lot of music. I mean, that never stops. But shows, I tried to go. I went to see the Rolling Stones last week.
Oh, you did?
Um,
How
I
was
did,
it?
yeah. They were good, surprisingly good, actually. I've never seen them, and I'm like, man, they're gonna die if I don't get to see them soon. So I should go while I can. Um, my wife and I go to shows like a lot, but not as much as I did when I was younger because I work construction, so I have to be up like at the crack of dawn in the morning usually. So it doesn't always, I have good intentions. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go see X show, and then that night rolls around and
You're
I'm on the
pickier
couch and
now. You're
I'm just
picky.
like, I don't think I can do it.
Oh, I
So,
know that feeling, man. I really do. Hey, man, thanks a lot for coming
oh,
on
no
and
problem.
talking
Thanks for
to
having
me.
me.
And, good luck with the new record. I really enjoyed seeing you guys live. I'm definitely going to come and see you again. And
Awesome.
all right, man, good luck. All right.
All right. Thanks, Steve. I'll
Thanks,
see you
Scott.
soon. All right. Bye.